This episode of the Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon.
If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scenes at the end of each episode, or even contribute to the discussion in the episode itself, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. Here we are, Richard. Here we are doing an off-week episode, something which the way we plan our podcast is like we try to avoid as many like miscellaneous off weeks as possible. If we can fit in like, oh, the Oscars are coming up, let's just do Oscars episodes, we can. We say this a lot, but a little peek behind the curtain. We hate coming up with these ideas for non-film franchise Fortnights episodes, don't we?
I love coming up with them. In fact,
Okay, well, you can come up with them from now on then and stop asking me to.
Well, okay, I can't remember the last one you came up with. Well, actually,
Film
you came up with the game.
Fight.
Yeah. Which you kind of half came up with, and we had to come up with the rest on the podcast.
That's podcasting, baby.
Yeah, but I've come up with some great ones, including today's podcast, as thought of by your boy Richard, joined by AJ, who did not contribute.
What are you talking about? Did not contribute? I made the little graphic we posted on Instagram.
Oh yeah, I thought you would have done more with it.
Well, I'll do more with the thumbnail. That wasn't the thumbnail.
Okay, no, hey. I'm just saying.
Welcome, motherfuckers, to the Cult Popture podcast, where we talk about movies. That's something we do. That's
talk
something
about
that
arguments we've had behind the scenes, and we make you part of them.
So Richard, what are we doing for an hour today on the podcast?
Well, be excited about it. Today,
I am excited about it.
We're talking about something that... it's a fun topic. We've talked about this. It's sort of was a segment on our podcast for a while, but the idea of there's gold in them there hills, which is the phrase that we say when we're talking about bad films, but there is something good in it. So this varies. It could be, a great idea, it could be a great scene, it could be a great line of dialogue, quite a one that people like to talk about as a great performance in a terrible film, and we put the call out to you guys, the listeners, to see what you guys could suggest. We've got a few of our own, and we've got a few of just like the obvious ones that when you bring this up as a topic that people always talk about, I've just Googled great performances in bad films, and so we've got things like that to read through.
And there's something very I don't know, it's the kind of conversation that film nerds inevitably end up having, and I think that's what's special about it. Like, a lot of people when we posted about this were like, great topic, which is funny because I think this is I think we've talked about some of this stuff before on pod. Like, it's just come up, as you said.
Because we've covered a lot of bad films, so
that's true. With great stuff with gold in them there hills. And I think it's very similar to probably half a dozen post-credit scenes questions that we've had in previous episodes, I think, but we're certainly going a bit more deeper on it now.
And also the good thing about this is that it allows us, next time we're doing an off week, we can do the inverse of this, which is
correct.
That put your thinking caps on now, and about a month we'll come to you asking for this. But what is and I want to say it's like not even necessarily like a movie ruining bad thing in a good film, but just that one thing that just sticks out like a sore thumb that isn't as good. One person who cannot carry, the same gravitas to their performance as anyone else. One line of dialogue, and probably in a Nolan film that just sticks out because, there's one in every Nolan film. One scene, one subplot.
Perhaps an anal sex joke in a film where there's been zero anal sex jokes up until that
things
point.
Like that. But I think the key difference is that because these are things where we're like, the film is bad. This isn't enough to save the film. And so the inverse of that is this isn't enough to ruin the film, but it is a bad thing in the film.
And there's another sort of contingent that we could do in a third off week's time, which is similar to this one, but it's a "This is why we can't have nice things" episode. An episode on movies with great concepts that got fucked up, which it's probably too similar to this, actually.
Well, yeah,
but
okay,
anyway.
I was just going to close the tab of movies that wasted good concepts.
So, as I said, we have covered a few gold and then their hills kind of situations on the podcast. There's been plenty of one-star films we've talked about that have had incredible songs in them. I'm talking about Lone Dinosaur from whichever Land Before Time movie that was in.
Friends
or
for Dinner.
Santa Brought Me You from A Cinderella Story. The Christmas Wish I've also written down here. Rob Zombie's Forgotten Halloween 2 makes some more of the interesting creative decisions in the whole franchise, but is still firmly a bad movie, I think. The pterodactyl scene in Jurassic Park 3, I'm just rattling off stuff that we've already talked about. Right. And I think this was a Patreon episode. I think there are genuinely some very subversive jokes and concepts in movie 43. I've always thought that. I thought that before I saw it all properly and was like, yeah, okay, a lot of this is dog shit, but those scenes that I thought were funny, they're still funny.
I don't know that subversive would be the word I would use. I can understand that, with a child brain like your own, there's some stuff you might find funny, but I don't know that I'd call any of it subversive.
Maybe irreverent was the word I was meaning.
But the other big one that we've covered that will likely be like the thumbnail for this episode, because you'll probably just use the same thing you did for the call out.
I will not!
Is, of course, Billy Burke's performance as Charlie Swan in the Twilight movies, which I wouldn't even necessarily say are that bad, like specifically the first one, really. But Billy Burke, who plays Bella's father in those films, is putting his whole Billy Burkussy into the performance. And
it's Swanassi.
Yeah, and it's just the warmth that he brings to that character, the depth, the pain that he just wants to be a good father, and she keeps shutting him out, and it's an incredible performance. Lights up the screen whenever he appears.
Yeah, and look, another thing as well is, and I bring this up as we talk about Twilight, is obviously there are differing opinions out there of what counts as a bad movie. I think Twilight is bad enough to single out Charlie Swan as being a standout. But
it's also like it's stereotypically bad. Like it's got a reputation for being bad.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm talking about. So we got some. I'm not going to name any names. We got some submissions from various listeners, such as yourself listening. When we asked for examples from you guys, which we're like, okay, well, it's fine if you don't like The Godfather, but I'm not going to be like, we're not going to discuss how this one thing is the only good thing about The Godfather, because that's just not, then we're faking what we believe, and we have to discuss these points. So as you said, we've got some of our own, we've got some from you guys, and I've sort of cherry-picked the best and most interesting answers that we can talk about. But do we want to kick off, Richard, with maybe, is there a classic? I guess Charlie Swan's the classic. Is there another classic that we can talk about? I think there is one. I think there's one that might even usurp Charlie Swan as the thumbnail for this episode.
Wow. Is it that one scene in Sex and the City 2 where they discuss how tough motherhood is, and for women who can't afford nannies like them, it must be it's so much harder, and it's a rare moment of humility from the gals in Abu Dhabi.
No, it is not that scene.
That is a great scene.
It's not even a scene. It's a character, though enhanced probably by a specific scene.
Is it? Oh, you're talking, of course, about Matthew Lillard in the Scooby-Doo movies and his incredible performance of the farting competition with his CGI dog companion.
No, I am, of course, discussing, and this must be when you Googled it, this would have come up, I would think anyway, would be Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in Along Came Polly.
Yes.
A movie
it is
so
the
obscure
top answer on movies with a great performance on BuzzFeed or something.
Yeah. So I think this is interesting because Along Came Polly is one of those movies that is like not even really a flash in the pan when it comes out, fades into obscurity to, 20 years later you see it somewhere and you're like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that movie. And I think to Philip Seymour Hoffman's credit, he elevates that movie a little bit.
He's so good in that film. Like,
let's see.
I didn't realize that he wasn't a comedic actor for years because he's so good in this film. And that, it wasn't until years later that I saw great comedic performances from serious actors. And, he's always was able to add a bit of levity to scenes. But his intro in that, still during the opening credits, when he walks in and says, "Best man in the house," and he does this pratfall, and it is like to this day the funniest pratfall I've ever seen.
That's incredible.
It's a full body shot of him walking, and his shoes are too slippery, the floor's too slippery, and his feet just fall out from under him. It's incredible. And there's also the basketball scene as well, where he constantly going and go, "Let it rain," and missing every shot.
I also love that I've just sharted.
Which did that like bring sharted into the?
Yeah, right.
I think that's where like sharted.
That's where sharted comes from.
Sandy Lyle is the character's name, and he's like a former child star in the film as well, I think.
Right. 27% on Rotten Tomatoes and has a all-time comedic performance in it.
But it's also because the thing is that it's like I watched this film, and because you could watch it and be like, "Oh, Philip, it's Philip Seymour Hoffman." I watched this film because I was like, "Oh, Ben Stiller and Jennifer Aniston are funny," and then I was like, "Who is this hilarious man on the side?" That it's like. Yeah, it's not just, it's fun to see Philip Seymour Hoffman do a silly thing. I haven't rewatched it now that I like Philip Seymour Hoffman.
No, neither. Nor have I. And I want to talk about what's so funny about the pratfall scene as well. It's not just the physical comedy of it. It's that he comes out and, it comes out, he comes out and says, "Best looking man in the house." And it's such a confident... positive thing to say. I remember, and then he, falls over.
He's saying best man in the house because he's the best man at the wedding, isn't he?
Right, yeah. And I remember being told a story by an old boss of mine where he said he had this memory from primary school where the teacher left the room for like a minute to go do something.
I'm already laughing.
And some kid, this is the funniest story anyone has ever told me. Like, enough that it makes me giggle thinking about him telling me about it because I wasn't there. Right? He said the teacher, they were like 6 or 7 years old. Teacher leaves for an errand or whatever for a minute. And one of the kids in this guy's class walked up to the teacher's desk, sat on the teacher's chair, and put his feet up on the desk saying, "All right, everybody, I'm in charge now." And as he did, knocked over the teacher's coffee cup all over the desk. Can you imagine being there and seeing something like that? Incredible stuff.
Once we when at my old work, all of like the managers, anyone senior left and like made a joke and like, "All right, guys, behave yourselves." And we're like, we're adults. Within maybe 90 seconds, I was doing a bottle flip and I was like, "Do you reckon I can make it to that desk?" That was, like a solid 12 to 18 feet across for our American listeners, 3 or 4 meters across the room.
Yeah.
And I did it. Threw it across the room. It hit the screen of the computer, knocked it off the desk, dragged all like the mice and the keyboard and the speakers with it off the desk. And it was like, this is exactly what they were hoping wouldn't happen and why they jokingly told us to behave ourselves anyway. The computer was fine, but it was very funny that it was like, "Oh yeah, no, you were right. We should have behaved ourselves."
Yeah. All right, shall we crack it? How do we want to do this? Should we do our own ones first? Should we look at some fan suggestions?
Let's start with the fan suggestions, and then some of ours, I'm sure, will just come up as
this one will pave the way to a larger conversation. This is from Yellow Peachy on Instagram, who says, the straight-to-video Beauty and the Beast Belle's Enchanted Christmas has Tim Curry as a villain who has no business going as hard as he does. Flame emoji. And listen, Yellow Peachy, you're talking to two guys who have watched 43 Barbie movies and 47 Scooby-Doo movies in which Tim Curry voices multiple characters in both franchises. So we are well accustomed with how hard Tim Curry doesn't have to go in the voice roles that he does, but still does.
Yeah, how many other actors are like that? I mean, like Philip Seymour Hoffman is one there. It's like, I've never seen him turn in a bad performance. Yeah, Tim Curry is definitely one. Who else do people talk about? I mean, Nicolas Cage is the other obvious one that...
Well, Nicolas Cage is a great actor. He just doesn't always have great directors, I think.
Yeah, but he always tries.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what makes him a good actor.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And then you get people who almost never try, like Mark Wahlberg. Unless they have a great director like Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We've also got the Andrew Harding on Instagram who says, it probably doesn't count because the movie is a perfect blend of schlock, but the scene in Equilibrium where Christian Bale's character hears music for the first time is great. And I wonder if Christian Bale is another one of these actors maybe who I've never... Like, I've seen him in bad movies, but I don't think I've seen him be bad himself.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, unfortunately.
We got John Usher on Facebook who says he's listed a few specific performances. Regis Philbin and has a cameo in Little Nicky. That's apparently very good. Ray Liotta in Heartbreakers, and one which I think is a really good answer to this question, or at least a good movie for mining for this sort of thing. He says Rip Torn and Freddy Got Fingered is next level, and I don't know if I specifically like Rip Torn and Freddy Got Fingered, but there are two jokes in Freddy Got Fingered, which I think are genuinely funny. There's the sausage one, genuinely funny, and I've also come to become quite accustomed to the I'm the backwards man, I can walk backwards as fast as you can. But the rest of the movie, unwatchable. I literally never want to see it again for the rest of my life.
That was one of those films that it's, genuinely, and like, to the point where I don't even care that, people think it's subversive. It's like, because there's movies where it's like, I hate this, but I want to be in the cool kids club so bad. But it's like, no, I didn't even like the sausages joke.
You didn't even like the Daddy, would you like some sausages?
I didn't, no.
Fucking hell, dude. There is no hope for you ever liking Freddy Got Fingered. There's a little bit of hope for me. One that I've talked about on pod a number of times, and I was waiting all week for you to be like, so you're gonna talk about the movie that you always talk about when the subject comes up, but you never did, which has given me hope you've forgotten.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Which would be pretty cool. There is a 1995 movie, Richard, by the name of Casper, sometimes called Casper the Friendly Ghost.
I'm not familiar with it. I don't think I've ever heard you bring this up.
Really? Okay, so Casper 1995, have you seen it?
Casper's an issue. I always thought I've just seen the sequel, but I haven't seen the sequel. As I've gotten older, I realized that I haven't seen the sequel, but I don't think I've seen the first one. I've seen a live-action Casper movie where there's, like, 3 other ghosts.
Yeah. Fatso, Stinky, and Stretch.
Is that Casper, or is that a sequel?
That's Casper.
Okay, so
No, that's Casper.
I feel like I've just seen half of it, maybe?
I think they're in all of them. It's got Christina Ricci and Bill Pullman.
You tell me, because I've heard this story a million times, and I'll Google which Casper film I've seen.
So I think Casper is a real bad movie, but it has a James Horner score. And what initially started out as me being like, the score's real good, like with a little more craft, Casper could kind of be like seen as one of these 90s gems like Jumanji or something. And then I discovered James Horner also did the score for Jumanji. So what I think I'm saying is James Horner scoring a bad movie is potentially an answer to all of these questions if we're stuck, if we're looking for a good one. But I also think that if you were to look up every clip that the YouTube channel Movie Clips has posted from Casper 1995, you would think it's this eerie but touching, underrated 90s gem. There's this beautiful scene where he's talking to Kat, who's played by Christina Ricci, as she's falling asleep. Casper is, and she's falling asleep as he's like talking about how important she is to him, and he says, "Can I keep you?" And it's a very beautifully delivered line of dialogue by a young Devon Sawa, by the way. Yes. And so I always thought that was a really beautiful scene. And there's this other scene where he like slowly remembers how he died. And it's like, Jesus Christ, it's beautiful. He basically describes getting pneumonia without realizing it's what caused his death, because he's talking about getting a sled for his birthday and riding it down the hill and getting stuck in the snow and getting really, really cold. And previously in the movie, he's talked about how he doesn't remember how he died. It's gorgeous stuff. And the rest of the film has the vibe of like a holiday program that you drop your 10-year-old off at because you've got errands to run during the school holidays. You know?
A couple of things. It's actually not Devon Sawa who delivers that line. Malachi Pearson voices Casper. Devon Sawa plays him in the human form. I think I've seen Casper: A Spirited Beginning.
Okay.
Which is the direct-to-video
we haven't covered this on the podcast, but I watched these out of my own interest about 7 or 8 years ago. And
just before we started the podcast.
Just before we started the podcast. And they're not really like connected. They're just other live-action movies that have Casper in them.
See, the thing that confused me is that because I've thought this before and gone, I haven't seen Casper. I'm pretty sure I haven't seen Casper, but I've seen a Casper movie. And I always thought I'd seen a prequel or something like that. I had a vague memory that I've seen something. And then I've gone on the page for Casper: A Spirited Beginning, and the poster makes it look like it's an animated film. Now, if you look up the poster, you're going to think, Richard, you're so stupid. Like, there is a live action boy on it, but he's so small I couldn't tell. But the thing that I've clearly missed every other time I've Googled this is the subtitle for the film, or the tagline, which is all new live action film.
Michael McKean is in Casper: A Spirited Beginning.
So is Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah.
I imagine he probably doesn't get any respect in it.
All right, what's one you've got? What's a movie you think is bad but has some gold in it?
So you talked about recently on the Stuart Little episode that the only break you got from the reprieve you got from the horrific depths of Stuart Little was every time he drove around in his little red Corvette. There was a similar thing. I watched a movie recently, and the only reprieve I got from the low quality of the film was every time that the main character hopped in or on their vehicle. And that was, you might have seen memes of this, but The Pope's Exorcist was not a very good movie. But every time that big old Russell Crowe got on his tiny little Vespa, it tickled me pink.
Is it good though, or ironically good?
It's a good question. It's very funny
because I feel like what we're trying to say is ironic.
Yeah. My big issue with The Pope's Exorcist is that it's like, I can't tell if this film is trying to be funny or not, and that feels like something that's like, here's a joke. Here's a very clear joke. The juxtaposition of this very serious man on this very silly vehicle, and so that's the one time in the movie where it's like, we're on the same page here.
Okay, very nice. We've got some more comments here. Ben Close on Facebook says, think what you like of Agent Cody Banks, but you cannot deny the excellent screen presence of Keith David, a true delight in every scene. And just in case it hasn't been mentioned, the opening sequence of X-Men Origins Wolverine, an X-Men Origins story so enticing that it fooled me into thinking the whole movie was actually good. This, again, is maybe one of these maybe this one is the thumbnail. Which of these are thumbnail worthy?
Yeah, that's the question we're asking.
And I
fucking
think
knowing
AJ
is just going to make the Casper scene.
The X-Men Origins Wolverine opening stuff is, that's a classic example of
Yeah.
everyone being like, this is fucking great. Is the whole movie going to be like this?
Yeah, the other thing that similar vibe, but people aren't as harsh on the film, and I think the film's good, is Zack Snyder's opening of Watchmen. The alternate history, times they are changing, is... I mean, I also think, I would say, if you're saying the film is bad, that and the creation of Dr. Manhattan sequence are both 10 out of 10 scenes.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the opening gets more cred because that's like an original sort of presentation of the information, whereas the Dr. Manhattan thing is basically like frame by frame comic from the graphic novel. One that I discovered recently, so and trying to like kickstart my brain into remembering these examples, I went through my Letterboxd, like all the films that I've watched on Letterboxd, and I sorted by 3 stars to see which, because 3 stars to me can either mean this wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, or it can mean this wasn't very good, but there was some spice in it that I liked,
there was
which
some
is
gold
gold
in them hills.
And I think one of the best examples that I can give, and this is, Richard, a very niche thing to say, but I think you'll enjoy it, is, have you ever seen Foot Rot Flats: A Dog's Tale?
I haven't, no.
So, what's the Foot Rot Flats?
Foot Rot Flats is a newspaper comic strip in New Zealand.
Yeah,
made
in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yep, so it's essentially, look up Foot Rot Flats if you're not from New Zealand. If you are, you'll probably know what it is. But it's about a farmer and his dog in rural New Zealand.
What's the dog's name?
The dog's name is just Dog, I believe. And the cat's name, Bear. Isn't that confusing? And so like it was very popular with sort of Gen X boomer generations. I don't dislike it, but it's not a new thing, is sort of what I'm saying. And in the late 80s, they made a feature film of it, which is shocking because it's like New Zealand.
It's like if they made a Garfield film.
Yeah, but in New Zealand, like New Zealand doesn't have like an animation studio. Well, they do. We do now probably. But in the late 80s, it's surprising.
Yeah, how do you think they make VeggieTales, AJ?
That's true. That's very true. Anyway, the movie, I watched it a couple of months ago, and it's a bunch of like vignettes that have a very loose connective story.
You're like, how did they make a movie out of a comic strip? And then it's like, oh, they did it. That's how.
Yeah, they did it, exactly. And I wasn't really enjoying it all that much, but then in like the film's climax where they're trying to stop like I think the dog is in the helicopter or something like that, and they run to the beach to try and save him. And all of a sudden I saw something I've never seen before, Richard, which is a New Zealand beach animated on film.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, this is really special to me. This, I've seen 100 beaches animated. I've been to 100 New Zealand beaches.
But none of them have the shards of glass and the used needles.
Yeah. Well, the brush, the New Zealand plant life, I feel, is very specific to our beaches. And it was just this thing where it was like this, and it was really well illustrated as well. And I was like, this is
probably the best part
really cool. Yeah. And it was... And it's something that, this is why I enjoy watching old New Zealand films in general, is, you watch, Goodbye Pork Pie, you can see the Auckland Harbour Bridge but there's no Sky Tower because it was made before the Sky Tower was built, So it's, weird trying to place everything. And I enjoy watching old New Zealand movies for that reason, but I'd never combined that with animation before, and I don't think there's probably any other examples. And
that's a good thing. I thought you were going to say about Foot Rot Flats is that it's a, even by New Zealand standards, it's a fairly forgettable film, and I think there's not a lot of people that, other than diehard Foot Rot Flats fans that would defend the movie necessarily, but it did produce 2 of New Zealand's most iconic songs.
That's true.
Slice of Heaven by Dave Dobbin and Herbs is the da 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 boom dum da that you could sing that to anyone in New Zealand and they know exactly what song you're singing. Shouldn't You Ought to Be in Love, slightly less so, but it's still an iconic song from that. But it's not necessarily my one because I haven't actually seen the movie, but one that I've had a couple of people mention is, and I was talking to someone at work about, I gave them the prompt of this episode, and he said the Thunderbirds movie, the live action one, that movie sucks, but he said love the redesign of the actual Thunderbirds, and that a lot of people, but he said like a lot of people didn't like the redesign of the Thunderbirds, but they all just look and feel so much more like functional ships in Thunderbirds movie. But the other thing about it that's a highlight for myself and many others is that the Busted theme song that they did for the film Thunderbirds Are Go, which was their last release before they broke up. And I've spoken to people who it's like that's all they know of Busted is they just real love that one song they did for that movie that was shit.
These are such great movies to be bringing up. I think of the Thunderbirds live action movie, I'm transported to the like kids section of my United video in 2003 with all they're always like really crusty looking DVDs and VHS like that are like 5 years old, and I feel like I remember seeing Thunderbirds.
Did you ever get it out?
Transported. I think I've seen it, yeah.
Well, so when you say you don't know Busted songs, you've heard one.
Is the Thunderbirds live action movie, is that the one that has the joke where you see a puppet hand put down a phone at one point?
I haven't seen it. So.
Like there's an insert shot of someone hanging up a phone and it's the puppet hand, but they don't like draw attention to it.
Oh, that's cool. I like
that. Yeah. We've got Sam Stanley on Facebook says, although I personally love both these movies, the two that come to mind are Peter Dinklage in Pixels and Raul Julia in Street Fighter.
Yeah, he's another one of the quintessential ones that, again, I haven't seen the movie. I've watched a couple of clips from Street Fighter because it pops up all the time and these sort of things. The famous thing being he plays Bison and she's like, oh, you killed my family. And he's like, I don't remember that, sorry. And she's like, what? And he says, for you, the day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life.
Oh my God.
For me, it was Tuesday.
Wow.
And that's like, everyone's like, that line, incredible movie, one of the worst pieces of shit I've ever seen.
Over on Discord, our friend Carlisle threw a TV show into the mix, saying that season 4 of Community sucks, but there's a bit where Beetlejuice is said and a person dressed as Beetlejuice walks past in the background because it's the third time in the whole series that the words Beetlejuice had been said.
That's interesting because that's pops up every. I've seen that reference a few times, but I do wonder if Dan Harmon was intentionally cooking that through seasons 2 and 3 or whenever it's actually said the first 2 times. But then, and if he was annoyed that he didn't get to do the payoff, or if it's just one of the season 4 writers noticed that, because like Dan Harmon, I think, has still said he hasn't watched season 4.
Right. No, he has watched it.
Oh, he like live tweeted it or something, didn't he?
Yeah, he said it was like watching his children getting murdered or something
like
that. So we've also got Rivx, who's got a few examples which we'll go through as the episode goes on. Rivx says, the cards I was given for my tickets for Yu-Gi-Oh! Pyramid of Light. They also say the gag in Scary Movie 3 where the sheriff's hat gets bigger
that is a fantastic
It's a
gag.
great joke. And there are the Scary Movie movies are probably gold mines. We took gold and then their hills. These are probably shitty, horrible hills filled with gold.
Yeah.
You know, the
well, how much gold do you before it's just a hill made out of gold?
I think it's a case by case basis, and Scary Movie is decidedly not a good series of movies. I'm not stooping that. But there's the bit in is it 3 where Anna Faris leaves the room and leaves the kindergarten, and someone throws coloured pencils at the door, and
Brenda,
what's her name? Brenda turns around and says, "Who the fuck did that?" That's one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Well, same with the in The Ringer reminds me of that. When the fuck do we get ice cream?
Yeah, The Ringer, a movie you borderline can't talk about. That's how.
Yeah, you can't say anything these days.
And finally, Rivix also says the Dunkachino sequence from Jack and Jill. Now, this is a great example. I have not seen Jack and Jill, but that's the Adam Sandler movie where he plays a man and that man's sister.
And was nominated for worst actor and worst actress at the Razzies.
I think the one of the only scenes I've seen from this movie is when it's because Adam Sandler's character is like a advertising
ad agent,
sales,
yeah.
It makes an ad agent, and they get Al Pacino to advertise a Dunkin' Donuts new combo that he's doing, where he walks in and it's actually Al Pacino singing lyrics that are like Dunkachino, say hello to my chocolate blend, and it's like him essentially
What's my name?
bastardizing
Dunkachino.
Dunkachino.
Yeah.
It's him basically like bastardizing all his classic lines of dialogue, making a mockery of it in a way that I feel I haven't seen in real, like outside of this before. Like you rarely hear, I guess, like Arnold Schwarzenegger saying "I'll be back" in every movie he was in after Terminator, but like it's just crazy. It's like, wow, this is one of the greatest actors of all time sucking shit. How interesting, you know?
So I haven't seen the movie either, but I feel very strongly about this scene, as you well know, AJ. Sorry, I'll let you finish your point.
So I saw this in isolation and had all these thoughts, like, wow, what a horrendous thing Adam Sandler forced Al Pacino to do. And then the scene immediately following this is Adam Sandler and Al Pacino watching the cut back, and Al Pacino going, you need to destroy every copy that exists of this. Burn this. And I think that's an incredible joke. I like if it was sincere, yeah, obviously it's terrible. But the fact that they have the characters, I think that's a platinum joke.
That is also, for the record,
film
that is
history.
The end of the film as well. That is the last line. Last line of the film is burn this, like destroy every copy of this, which some scholars believe to be Adam Sandler's equivalent of, you know what, I think this is my masterpiece from the end of Inglourious Basterds.
Do you know Quentin Tarantino was originally going to play that character who says that line, so it was going to end with Quentin Tarantino looking into the camera saying, I think this is my masterpiece. But do you know what I mean? Like that is a joke that you can only do if you're as famous as Adam Sandler, because you can't get Al Pacino to do it otherwise. Like, yeah, exactly. I think it's a great joke, and I think anyone who says, like, this is so sad, look what Al Pacino's stooped to, it's like, yeah, baby, that's the joke.
Yeah, the joke is, look how sad it is that the fictional character Al Pacino has stooped this low.
Yeah.
But the thing that, because I've seen people on Reddit and stuff be like, you know, that whole, oh, this is garbage. But yeah, I think it's a great end to the film as well, that it's Adam Sandler realizing, what the fuck is this piece of shit I've made? But the thing that really fucking grinds my gears about this is the joke is that he goes in to this is the plot of the commercial inside the movie, is Al Pacino playing himself goes into a Dunkin' Donuts, and he says, they go, oh, Al, here's your drink ready for you, and he goes, it's not an Al anymore, it's Dunk, and they go, Dunkachino, and then it like launches into the song, what's my name, Dunkachino. But it's like, his name isn't Alp or Alpa. It's Al Pacino. It's Dunk Pacino would be the, like, his name would be Dunk Pacino. And they just breeze over it. Like, no one addresses the fact that that's, like, if you change his first name, you don't take out the first consonant sound of his surname as well.
But Richard, they're trying to make a pun with, like, cappuccino.
Yeah.
It's a three-way pun, and one of the parts of the three-way has to watch for a bit, which is the name Pacino has to sit out for the rest of the joke.
You get where I'm coming from, though, right? That, like,
I get where you're coming from, but I also don't think it would be, like, better if it was Dunk Pacino.
No, I'm just saying, don't do that joke. Don't say my first name is Dunk. Like,
right.
Yeah, that is like, I'm sorry, the joke doesn't work because his name isn't Alp Pacino.
Maybe that's why Al Pacino in the film wanted to be.
Yeah, he's like, that's not my name, burn this. Yeah, it's interesting because I think a Dunkachino is like a frappe, right?
I don't know.
So it's actually,
I got no fucking idea, dude.
Oh no! Oh, so Dunkachino is like literally just the song. Oh no! Oh, so, okay, yeah. So yeah, because I thought it was
It
like
got discontinued recently, I think.
yeah. Well, interesting. Oh, the Dunkachino was like, oh, wait, it is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. So it is a cappuccino. So yeah, I thought it was a rip on a frappuccino, but yeah.
Right. One of our Discord users whose name is currently Activity, it's usually Cheese, but everyone changed their names for Paranormal Activity references, has a really good one, I think, which is Jason Momoa in Fast X is the most engaging villain of the franchise. So silly, different, and fun. I couldn't agree more. Easily the best villain in Fast and Furious, and in my opinion, the only thing stopping Fast X from being the worst film in the franchise.
Yeah, I tell you what, it
Jason
made it.
Momoa.
Yeah, it was. I was talking about this with someone the other day about the upcoming Aquaman film and how I presume it's going to be terrible, but that when doing the press for Fast X, I was able to look Jason Momoa in the eye and tell him that he was great in the film. I couldn't tell him necessarily the film was great, but I was able to say, Jason, you were great in this film. You looked like you were having so much fun. Because he did, and he was.
Yeah. Parasocial Activity from Hawaii, I believe is Dan from Hawaii, says Skimbleshanks the cat in Cats 2019, and a bafflingly chaotic film that takes itself too seriously. Skimbleshanks the Railway Cats musical number shows that Cats could have actually been a great film. It's a hint of brilliance in a clustered pile of kitty litter. I've watched the film multiple times, and every single person with whom I've watched loves that scene and admits it's good. Even the people who hate the rest of the film, which is every normal person I know.
There's an interesting thing. There's a Sideways, I think, is the name of the YouTube channel that does videos on like why the music in XYZ is worse than you thought. And the one about cats is like over an hour long. It's really interesting, but he admits like Skimbleshanks is fucking great though. But the thing that sets Skimbleshanks apart, and this is a problem with Les Mis as well as Cats, is the recording live, and then also for Les Mis especially, they were like, oh, on set, we'll have someone there just sort of playing piano in your ear, but you do the performance, and then the orchestra will play based on your performance. So you can play around with the tempo, you can play around with whatever you want, and then the orchestra will come in. And so they're having to like have bars of different counts and like just things that make no sense musically because they're not performing to a live recording or maybe just like a click track, which is what normally, on those kind of things you would have a click track and so you get the tempo and everything right. And Cats, there's so many like stop and start and yada yada, and but the thing is that like the guy that plays Skimbleshanks is like a classically trained dancer more than an actor, or like he's a Broadway talent, and so he comes from. And the whole thing is like a tap dance thing. And so because he's tapping, the tempo he has to be following the tempo and the beat of the song perfectly anyway, so that he can be tapping the beat and then singing to that beat that he is creating with his body. And so like that's why, purely from a musical perspective, it's like one of the best preserved songs from the stage play. And also, probably already the best song. And then you have someone that just really knows what they're doing, didn't buy into Tom Hooper's kind of, go any which way you like with it. And although the one thing about Skimbleshanks, though, is that it's one of the real, like, the perspective in Cats, the movie especially, is like never clear that, sometimes the cats are like, oh yeah, if you scale this up, they would be tiny. And then sometimes it's like, oh, they're about half the size of a human. And then I think in Skimbleshanks, they're like notably smaller than other parts of the film.
Right. Latino spin-off says the reconstruction of Sandman in Spider-Man 3. I've cooled on my views of the film over the years, but that scene was always amazing to me. The score building up alongside the shape of the man, the reaching out for the picture of his daughter, no dialogue needed. I agree.
Yeah, great. So, and also that's because Sam Raimi, we know that he didn't want to put Venom in the film. He was only interested in Sandman, and there's a lot of care put into that scene. You can tell.
Latino spinoff also calls Willem Dafoe as Ryuk in Netflix's Death Note, an example of this, which I get, but also it's so expected. And I think when I heard, I had some idea of what Death Note was before the Netflix movie came out, and when it was announced that it was Willem Dafoe, it felt like one of these like the internet casted kind of things. But yeah, I
also, like we talked about this on the Death Note episode, but it's like he's very much, like because the English dub of Ryuk is essentially just doing a Willem Dafoe impression, but the like original intent of that character is actually quite different.
Right, there you go. This is the only movie I'll include that someone suggested because that I think the movie's not terrible, but I'll mention it anyway. Pyramid says that Godzilla 2014, Godzilla spraying nuclear breath down Muto's throat, is a single moment of childlike joy in an otherwise thoroughly unentertaining movie. And all I want to say here is, if we're talking about the great things in Godzilla 2014 that were underused, we're talking Bryan Cranston. We're not talking.
Although the Muto, the breath down the Muto's throat is fucking sick. It's so cool.
Yeah,
I remember that
like
being like
movie,
a stand up and cheer moment in the cinema. But I like the rest of the film, along with their other suggestions, which we don't need to go into.
Mike Noyes says the marching skeleton army at the end of Black Cauldron. You seen Black Cauldron?
No.
Says, I loved that movie when I was a kid. It went unavailable for years. Finally, in college, it came out of VHS. I was so excited to finally see it again. It had built up so much in my memory, and man, did that movie suck. I was so disappointed. The kids were annoying. The sidekick was extremely annoying. All things I remembered liking as a kid, but the marching skeletons at the end were still rad as hell. That's some dark shit for 80s Disney.
I haven't seen the film, so...
Craig says... there's a scene in the Emoji Movie, a one-star film in every regard, that floored me when I took the kids to see it at the cinema. The meh emoji's parents, both meh emojis themselves, are looking for him through a bunch of apps and get separated. His mum wanders into the Instagram app and ends up in a photo of a Paris street with a fountain and the Eiffel Tower in the background. As she walks through the area, everything is frozen in place. She walks past birds in mid-flight, all the droplets of water and the fountain is suspended in midair, etc. It is beautiful. The scene is so visually striking that I was in awe of it. Then the emojis start talking to each other, and I remembered I was watching a dog shit movie. I haven't seen the Emoji Movie, but I watched the scene in isolation, and gotta say, I think, Craig, this is maybe an example of like, you were so bored to tears for the rest of the movie that the scene because in isolation, I was like, oh yeah, this is all right. I imagine this is what most of the movie's like. So if that's the highlight of the movie to such a profound degree, then I can't imagine that the rest of the movie is any good.
Yeah, that's really funny.
Do you have any more that you want to talk about?
One that we covered on the podcast, and one of the most miserable experiences I've had on this podcast when we covered the Phantasm films, and.
I just thought Reggie was all right. Reggie was a shining light in every one of those films.
But you can say, even if you say the first film's good, which the first one was pretty decent, but the franchise as a whole, which I didn't enjoy, the theme music is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, that seems to be what we're discovering in this is like it's often the music that's the standout. Another example in that same vein, I'd say the movie, and for all the fans, let me finish before you stop listening. The movie Music and Lyrics, starring Hugh Grant and Drew Barrymore, is not a bad movie. It's not a bad movie. I think it's a solid 3 out of 5 with a heart. Like it's a fun movie, but the music in it is great, and it's not only great music, it's like they make an 80s one-hit wonder in it, like In the World Pop Goes My Heart, which sounds so authentic, and I think that's so cool that they created like a forgotten 80s gem, similar to the music in Josie and the Pussycats, but that movie is not. That movie
fucking
rocks.
I will also just music that my love for the music pushed me into liking this film. But Eurovision Song Contest, the story of Fire Saga, there was quite a few good jokes in there, but there's some really good songs in there. The Husavik, My Hometown, that like the big finale song is great. Double Trouble is great fun, which is the one that they sort of like get into the song contest with. Volcano Man, Ya Ya Ding Dong.
Ya Ya Ding Dong.
Also, that's another one, a performance from that film is Dan Stevens as the Russian entry is fantastic in that film.
I love when they're like, "You gay?" And he's like, "What? No?" And they're like, "Are you gender fluid?" No, he, him.
And he's like, there's no gays in Russia.
It's so funny. It's like the first time I've heard he, him spoken in pop culture. Such a big thing in our real life. But yeah. A couple others I'd like to rattle off. It's Chapter 2, a movie I didn't like and struggled to see why it was necessary.
Oh, but the Angel of the Morning scene.
It's maybe got the best young to old casting I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah,
except for, I reckon, what's the girl's name? She should have been Amy Adams and
Sophia
not Jessica
Lillis,
Chastain. Yeah, I think that's another example of the internet casting someone, was everyone's like, Jessica Chastain, when Amy Adams, the spitting image of Sophia Lillis, is right there.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but yeah, I thought
Bryce Dallas Howard would have worked too, I'm sure.
No, but they would have been just as, I don't know, I just think Sophia Lillis and, like, she's more than just ginger, which is the only common thing that Jessica Chastain and Sophia Lillis has. Like, I think Amy Adams has the same, like, eyes and stuff as well. But I remember, like, Bill Hader as a grown-up Finn Wolfhard is a great call. I even thought the Kiwi guy from Go Girls that they cast as the fat kid grown up is, like, that looks like what the kid... You know what I mean? Like, body shape has changed, but it's the same. They did so well getting what, like, a fat kid grown up to a handsome man would look like, I thought, you know? And one that I never see anyone talk about, this is an AJ exclusive. Have you ever seen the 2012 CGI adaptation of The Lorax?
I actually haven't, no.
That movie everyone hates that movie. Well, there's a resurgence
it's
of it
huge
on,
on my TikTok, yeah, I was going to say.
I don't know if they like it, though. I think they just think it's
Is that one, the
film.
Thneed girl on TikTok? Do you see her?
Yeah. That movie, I always thought, like, the argument is, well, the Lorax didn't need to be a feature film, right? And that's fine. But if you have to make it a feature film, I always felt the way they stretched it out was really authentic to the original story. Like, it's set in, like, this dystopia, like, it's kind of a utopia, but it's actually a dystopia, where, like, the mayor is selling, like, bottled air. Oh, and I thought, what a great idea, right? Like that like air has become something you have to buy. Like, clean air it was shit like that. It just felt like an extension of the Dr. Seuss storybook in a really good way, and I feel like everyone just hated on it.
The book's so good.
The book's so good, of course.
Also, I remember when it was like first look at the Onceler in the Lorax, because in the book it's just a hand that comes off screen.
Yeah,
and then. I thought it was cool that the Onceler is just a guy. Like, it makes... again, I haven't seen the film, but I might watch it tonight. I don't know. But I have got 6 Paranormal Activities to get through.
Yeah, right.
But I know there's 7. I've already watched 1. But I just thought there was like, it drives the message home a lot more, because if you're like, oh, these, if you can blame it on a monster, but it's like, no, it is man that is causing the apocalypse.
And the last one that I wanted to mention is a movie that I remembered this being like a pretty bad movie. I looked it up. It has 78% on Rotten Tomatoes. Wow. But I think this comes from the good aspect of it, right? Have you ever seen or heard of a movie, Richard, called Return to the Batcave, The Misadventures of Adam and Bert?
I've heard of it, yes.
So this is a movie starring Adam West and Burt Ward, the stars of the 60s Batman TV show, who whenever this film was made, let's say 2006, the stars who played the villains in the show conduct an actual evil scheme, and Adam West and Burt Ward playing themselves have to team up to stop the guy who played the Riddler from actually being the Riddler. It's very silly and very stupid, right? I caught this on TV 15 years ago, right? And even as a youngin was being like, this is some like lame idea for a movie. However, that's only half the film. The other half of the film, interspersed throughout, is a flashback to the 60s where a super well-told biopic takes place. Like, and the future stuff, the stuff when they're old men, is like scary movie levels of reality, stupid shit happening. But the let's go back to the 60s, they get like really good lookalikes for young Adam West and Burt Ward. I think they voice over them as well, so because Adam West obviously got such a like inimitable voice, imitable voice, I guess. I'll come out when they're all gone. Family Guy joke. But it's like there's a bit where like
he's doing both our wives right now.
There's a bit where Burt Ward's wife leaves him because he has to kiss someone on set. And like that happened, like it's just a genuine biopic, and it's a completely different movie to the silly stuff that you're buying the DVD because, and it did not go to cinemas, so this was the only way to watch. I don't know, it's really cool. Do you have any more you wanted to go through?
When you go on Batman to the I'm on the Wikipedia page for Return to the Batcave, the misadventures of Adam and Bert, and at the bottom of the Wikipedia page how it has like the portal where it has like all the other things. So Batman TV series, this is specifically for the Adam West series. It has like spin-off productions and then shows and then films. So down the bottom, films, there's 4 films listed. One is Return to the Batcave, The Misadventures of Adam and Bert. The second one is The Wild World of Batwoman, which is just like a spin-off spoof sort of thing. The third is called Bat Pussy, and the fourth is called Batman Triple X, a porn parody. So that's the kind of level we're dealing with.
That's the tier it's been put in. Yeah, exactly.
So
I've probably got one more I can read unless you want to talk about anything.
I'm just on the Wikipedia page for Bat Pussy.
All right, we're going to end now this episode on one last suggestion from the fans, and I liked this one because it was kind of out of the blue and true. If I haven't seen the film being talked about here, but if true, if there is actually something this great in a movie that sounds this bad. This is from Rivix, who says, "This is a weird one, and I don't know if it counts, but I maintain that, ready for it? Grumpy Cat's Worst Christmas Ever is the best live-action Garfield movie that exists. It's pretty badly made, but it doesn't take itself seriously. There's a lot of very funny jokes. Grumpy Cat makes a lot of Deadpool-esque commentary, I believe voiced by Aubrey Plaza in the film, which is kind of what Garfield does because the audience is the only one that hears him. There's no CGI cat rapping. There's no attempt at animating Grumpy Cat's mouth, which is how Garfield should be. I just think it's a pretty good family movie that gets bogged down by the budget and being associated with a meme. Although the budget being low helps it not trying to have the big scope that doesn't match Garfield. And I think that's a good place to end because these are what Rivix is talking about here is you get too much budget, you go too big for your britches, you end up making an entirely bad movie. But Richard, when you don't have as big of a budget, but you still have a bad script, you have the power then to fall back on tricks and devices and things. And some of those tricks and devices, in some cases, can become a genuinely piece of gold in
their hills.
And
I just want to end with a piece of advice. And that is, do not Google the real Grumpy Cat's name. Worst mistake of my life.
Thank you for listening, everybody. If you enjoyed this, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Popture. You can also donate to our Patreon for at patreon.com/Popture. And if you want to get involved in discussions like this, hop in the Discord, which there'll be a link to in the show notes. We will be going now, after this music ends, to the post-credit scene. Stick around for that, and we'll see you next week for Paranormal Activity. Welcome along, everybody, to the post-credit scene. This is a segment at the end of each episode. If you donate $5 or more over at patreon.com/Popture, you get to give us something to talk about, and this is the post-credit scene. Richard, who's it from and what is it?
All right, I'm going to give us a very fitting one for this episode. As Craig Major has asked, what is the most...
What's a movie a bad movie with one great thing in it?
What's the most profound bit of advice, life lesson, or piece of wisdom you've ever learned from the dumbest piece of media?
This is not something I can think of in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Do you have an answer?
No, I was hoping you would. I was like, AJ's going to have something for this, and then I'm going to, bam, drive it home with my witty repartee.
I think this isn't necessarily a dumb piece of... I feel bad for calling this a dumb piece of media, but maybe not someone who I'm that big of a fan of. Has a line in one of his movies that I still think about to this day, which is in the movie Dogma, the Kevin Smith movie, where Chris Rock, who plays an angel, is talking about religion, and he says, ideas are better than beliefs because ideas can change.
Oof.
And I sort of adopted that, and it's actually something I think about quite often now. Wow. What about you?
Yeah, that's good. I'm trying to think if there's something from like a YouTube video or something like that that's going to be like real embarrassing. I mean, I would say that like, and again, this is a dumb piece of media, but like most of what I know and believe I learned from The Simpsons.
Sure, yeah.
Just like
I'm probably the same with South Park in a lot of ways. and South Park was kind of my Simpsons. The timeline, if compared to you, like the timeline's not quite the same as you with The Simpsons, but like, and I don't like South Park anymore. But I don't like South Park. I've never really been into it. Thank you very much for listening, everybody.